The sound of military boots slamming against metal flooring echoed through Forward Operating Base Scorpion's mess hall like a judge's gavel demanding silence. Captain Blake Anderson, standing 6'1" with the muscular build of a ranger who'd earned every scar the hard way, hurled a stack of requisition forms onto the table where Sergeant Rachel Foster sat reviewing inventory reports. The papers scattered across her breakfast tray, some landing in her coffee. Maybe if support staff actually did their jobs, Anderson's voice boomed, loud enough for all 20 soldiers eating breakfast to hear clearly, real warriors wouldn't run out of ammunition in the middle of firefights. The mess hall fell into an uncomfortable quiet, forks hovering mid-air as everyone turned to watch the scene unfold. Anderson towered over Foster, who barely reached 5'4" even in her combat boots. She looked up from the coffee-stained documents with brown eyes that remained as calm as a desert morning before the heat sets in. Foster didn't stand. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she picked up each paper with movements so precise they could have been measuring explosives, not sorting through supply requests. The way her fingers aligned each sheet, squared every corner, spoke of muscle memory that went deeper than basic training. "Your request will be processed through standard channels, Captain," she said, her voice soft but carrying an undertone that made several veterans in the room unconsciously straighten their spines. Each word was pronounced with the kind of clarity that suggested she'd learned to communicate in situations where every syllable mattered. Anderson laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. He turned back to his team, 4 rangers bearing the tattoos and scars that advertised their combat experience like billboards. "This is exactly why we're always running short. Desk jockeys playing soldier while real men are dying out there." Sergeant Connor, Anderson's second-in-command, crossed his arms and smirked. His sleeves were rolled up to display forearms covered in unit tattoos and what looked like shrapnel scars. Maybe she needs a reminder about who does the actual fighting around here. The tension in the mess hall thickened like morning fog in the valleys surrounding Kandahar. Private Mason, an older soldier with the weathered face of someone who'd seen too many deployments, watched Foster's hands as she continued sorting papers. Something about the way she moved, economical and purposeful, triggered recognition in his experienced eyes. He'd seen that kind of controlled precision before, usually in people who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. Foster finished organizing the requisition forms into a perfect stack, edges aligned with military precision that went beyond what any supply manual required. She looked up at Anderson's team, her gaze moving from one ranger to the next with an assessment that lasted barely 2 seconds, but seemed to catalog every strength and weakness. "Gentlemen," she said, standing slowly, her small frame dwarfed by the warriors surrounding her table, "I understand you're frustrated. Combat operations require reliable supply chains. That's why we follow protocols designed to ensure resources reach the people who need them most, when they need them." Sergeant Liam, the 3rd Ranger, leaned against the table, intentionally invading her personal space. "Protocols? You want to lecture us about protocols while you sit here safe in the FOB counting boxes?" Foster didn't step back. She held her ground with a stillness that seemed unnatural for someone supposedly intimidated. "I want to ensure every soldier gets what they need to come home alive." "Every soldier?" Anderson's voice dripped with contempt. "You're not a soldier. You're an administrator in camouflage. There's a difference between warriors and people who just wear the uniform." The insult landed like a slap, but Foster's expression didn't change. She reached for her coffee cup, now half empty thanks to the scattered papers, and took a deliberate sip. Over the rim, her eyes found Colonel Martha Norbert entering the mess hall. The base commander paused at the entrance, taking in the scene with a quick glance that lingered on Foster for just a moment longer than necessary. An almost imperceptible nod passed between them. Private Ryan, the youngest of Anderson's team, decided to escalate the situation. He grabbed one of the requisition forms from Foster's stack. "Let's see what's so important that it needs all this bureaucracy." He made a show of reading it slowly, mockingly. 5,000 rounds of 5.56 ammo, 200. "Wait, you actually memorized the serial numbers on ammunition crates?" Foster's response was immediate and precise. "Lot number 73 Alpha 9426, Manufactured in Lake City, Missouri, shipped August 15th. Currently stored in Bunker 3, Section Delta, Shelf 4, temperature maintained at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Last inspection 72 hours ago, showing no degradation. The recitation silenced the mockery for a moment. Anderson recovered first. Congratulations! You can memorize numbers. That's really going to help when the enemy's shooting at you. It helps when a batch has manufacturing defects that could cause misfires, Foster replied evenly. Like the contaminated primers in Lot 7-2 Alpha that nearly got a patrol killed last month. I caught that because I check serial numbers. The mess hall had become completely silent now, even the kitchen staff pausing to watch the confrontation. Specialist Iris, a young intelligence analyst, noticed something odd about Foster's hands as she set down her coffee cup. Scars ran across her knuckles in patterns that didn't come from paperwork. They were the kind of marks left by close-quarters combat training, the kind where you hit things until your hands bled, then kept hitting. Anderson wasn't backing down. If anything, Foster's competence seemed to anger him more. You want to know what I think? I think you're one of those people who couldn't hack it in real combat, so you hide behind regulations and procedures, making life difficult for actual fighters to justify your existence. Blake, Connor added with a cruel smile, remember that female officer who washed out of Ranger School last year? Ended up in supply because she couldn't handle the physical requirements. Bet this one has a similar story. Foster began packing up her materials with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the encounter. As she reached for her jacket draped over the chair, her sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing part of a tattoo on her forearm. It was mostly hidden, but Private Mason caught a glimpse of what looked like wings and a skull, executed in the distinctive style he'd seen on certain operators who didn't officially exist in military records. I need to return to my duties, Foster said, her voice maintaining that same calm professionalism. Your requisition will be processed within standard timeframes, Captain Anderson. Standard timeframes? Anderson slammed his hand on the table, making several soldiers jump. We're deploying on a high-priority mission in 48 hours, and you're talking about standard timeframes? Foster paused at the edge of the table, her back straight, shoulders squared in a posture that belonged on a parade ground. High-priority missions require proper equipment verification. I'll personally ensure your gear is combat-ready, but I won't skip safety protocols that could get your team killed. Our team? Liam laughed harshly. Like you have any idea what our team faces out there. When was the last time you heard a bullet crack past your head? When did you last see a friend bleed out because some supply clerk didn't prioritize ammunition resupply? The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Foster's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the first real sign of emotion she'd shown. But instead of responding, she simply nodded, picked up her files, and walked toward the exit. Her gait was measured, controlled, each step placed with the kind of awareness that suggested she knew exactly where everyone in the room was positioned without looking. As she passed Colonel Norbert's table, the commander spoke without looking up from her tablet. Sergeant Foster, I'll need the inventory report for Sector 7 by 1400 hours. Yes, ma'am. It'll be ready. After Foster left, the mess hall exploded into hushed conversations. Anderson's team gathered around their leader, feeding off his indignation like wolves sharing a kill. But not everyone was joining their celebration. Master Sergeant Noah, an older ranger with 15 years of experience, approached Anderson's table with a cup of coffee and the kind of careful expression that suggested he was choosing his words carefully. Captain, Noah said quietly, you might want to ease up on Foster. Anderson looked up sharply. You defending the pencil pusher, Master Sergeant? I'm suggesting you don't know her full story. Noah took a sip of his coffee, his eyes distant as if recalling something. I was going through some old after-action reports yesterday. Found a reference to a support officer who coordinated an emergency resupply under fire in Kandahar back in 2019. Saved an entire company that was pinned down and out of ammo. Connor scoffed. So she made some phone calls from a safe bunker. Big deal. Noah shook his head slowly. The report said the officer personally drove the supply truck through an active firefight when the convoy got hit. Alone. at night, through territory controlled by Taliban fighters. "Bull crap," Anderson said flatly. "No supply clerk does that." "Maybe not," Noah agreed, setting down his coffee. "But the report had a call sign I recognized from some classified stuff I'm not supposed to talk about. Ghost 7. The table fell silent. Even Anderson's bravado faltered for a moment. The Ghost designation was legend among Special Operations Forces, reserved for operators who specialized in impossible extractions and operations that didn't officially exist. "That's ridiculous," Anderson finally said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Ghost operators don't become supply sergeants." Noah shrugged. "Probably just a coincidence. Same call sign, different person." He stood to leave, then paused. "But Captain, I've been in this business long enough to know that sometimes the most dangerous people in a room are the ones who don't need to prove it. Hey, if you're watching from a military base or have family serving, drop your location in the comments below. These stories of unsung heroes keeping our warriors alive deserve to be heard. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because tomorrow's story will blow your mind. A combat medic who saved an entire platoon using nothing but kitchen supplies. 2 hours later, Foster stood in Supply Bunker 3, conducting inventory with the kind of attention to detail that would have seemed obsessive to anyone watching. She checked each ammunition crate against her list, running her hands along the edges to feel for any signs of damage or tampering. Her movements were systematic, almost ritualistic, as if this routine was the only thing keeping darker memories at bay. "Lot 73 Alpha 9426, she murmured to herself, marking it off on her tablet. No visible degradation, seals intact, temperature within acceptable range. The bunker was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the mess hall earlier. Here, among the precisely organized shelves of equipment and ammunition, Foster could maintain the facade she'd carefully constructed over the past 2 years. The simple supply sergeant who did her job and avoided attention. Her fingers found the edge of the tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve, tracing the outline through the fabric. The wings and skull were part of a larger design that told a story she couldn't share, marked victories that didn't exist in any official record. 47 successful extractions. 47 times she'd gone into hell and brought people back. The 48th had been different. The 48th had required her to disappear. Staff Sergeant Henry, the armory supervisor, entered the bunker carrying a clipboard. He was a tall, lean man with the kind of quiet competence that came from years of keeping warriors equipped and alive. "Foster, I heard about this morning. Anderson can be a real piece of work." "It's fine," Foster replied, not looking up from her inventory. "He's frustrated. Combat troops always are when they're about to deploy." Henry studied her for a moment. "You know, I've been doing this job for 12 years. Seen a lot of supply sergeants come and go, but you're different." Foster's hands stilled on the tablet. "Different how?" "The way you handle weapons during inventory. You don't just check them, you assess them like someone who's had their life depend on equipment functioning perfectly." Henry set down his clipboard and leaned against a shelf. "And that thing you did last month, catching the defective ammunition batch? That wasn't in any manual. That was experience talking." Foster resumed her inventory, her voice carefully neutral. "I take my job seriously. People's lives depend on what we do here." "Yeah, but there's taking it seriously, and then there's what you do." Henry picked up an M4 carbine from the rack, checking its action with practiced ease. "You strip and reassemble weapons faster than most infantry. You know the effective range and penetration capabilities of every round we stock. Hell, yesterday I saw you looking at tactical maps of Anderson's upcoming area of operations." "I like to understand the full context of supply requests," Foster said, her tone suggesting the conversation was over. Henry didn't push. He'd been around long enough to recognize when someone was carrying secrets they couldn't share. Instead, he changed the subject. Anderson's team requested some non-standard equipment: thermal optics, extended-range communications gear, specialized breaching charges. The kind of stuff that suggests they're going after a high-value target. Foster's fingers paused on her tablet for just a moment. Did they file the proper authorization forms? Of course not. Anderson thinks regulations are for lesser mortals. Henry's smile was wry. But Colonel Norbert approved it anyway. Must be something big if she's letting them bypass normal channels. Foster pulled up Anderson's mission profile on her tablet, her eyes scanning the details with the kind of rapid assessment that suggested she was seeing more than just supply requirements. The target area was a valley she recognized, one of those places where the terrain itself was as dangerous as any enemy force. 3 ways in, 1 way out, with high ground on all sides that would give defenders every advantage. They're going to get slaughtered, she said quietly, more to herself than to Henry. What makes you say that? Foster caught herself, realizing she'd revealed more than intended. The terrain. I've seen similar operations in that area. Without proper reconnaissance and support, it's a death trap. Henry watched her carefully. You could tell Anderson. Warn him about the tactical situation. He wouldn't listen. Not from me. Foster closed the file and returned to her inventory. Warriors like Anderson don't take advice from desk jockeys. Speaking of life-saving equipment, today's military personnel rely on advanced tactical smartwatches that monitor vital signs in real time. These devices track heart rate variability, blood oxygen, and stress levels, crucial data when operating in hostile territories. Some models even feature emergency beacon systems that work without cell towers, potentially saving lives when comms go down. The next morning found Foster in the Tactical Operations Center at 0500 hours, 2 hours before her shift officially started. She stood before a wall-mounted map of the Ghazni province, studying the valley where Anderson's team would be operating. Her finger traced possible ingress and egress routes with the kind of familiarity that came from personal experience. Can't sleep either? Colonel Norbert's voice came from behind her. Foster didn't startle, suggesting she'd been aware of the commander's approach. Just reviewing the operational area, ma'am. Norbert moved to stand beside her, coffee cup in hand. Anderson's mission briefing is at 0700. He specifically requested that no support personnel attend. Understood, ma'am. They stood in silence for a moment, both studying the map. Finally, Norbert spoke again, her voice lower. You know that valley. It wasn't a question. Foster's jaw tightened slightly. I've studied the terrain reports. That's not what I mean, and we both know it. Norbert took a sip of her coffee. I pulled your full file, Foster. The real one, not the sanitized version in the standard database. Interesting reading, especially the parts that were redacted. Foster remained silent, her posture rigid. 47 successful extractions, Norbert continued, some of them in places that shouldn't have been survivable. They called you Ghost 7 because you could get in and out of situations that would have killed anyone else. That person doesn't exist anymore, ma'am. No? Then who's standing here at 0500 analyzing tactical approaches to a valley she's definitely never been to? Norbert's tone was gentle but pointed. Rachel, I know why you're here. I know what happened on that last mission, why you had to disappear. But Anderson's team is walking into something they don't understand. Foster finally turned to face her commander. With respect, ma'am, Captain Anderson made his position clear yesterday. He doesn't want input from support staff. No, he doesn't. Norbert set down her coffee cup and pulled out a folder marked with classification stamps. But maybe he'd listen to this. She opened the folder, revealing a series of after-action reports, commendations, and photographs. One photo showed a younger Foster in full combat gear, face obscured by tactical paint and equipment, standing with a team of operators whose faces were completely blacked out for security reasons. The only identifying mark was a unit patch showing a skull with wings and the number 7. I could reveal who you really are, Norbert said. Order you back to active operations. Foster's response was immediate and firm. No, ma'am. The moment my identity becomes known, I'm a target. Not just for enemy forces, but for our own people who were compromised by what I discovered. The only reason I'm alive is because everyone thinks Ghost 7 died in that cave-in. Norbert nodded slowly, closing the folder. Then we maintain your cover. But Foster, if things go wrong out there, I'm just a supply sergeant, ma'am. That's all I can be. The conversation was interrupted by Corporal Ethan, the night duty communications specialist, entering the operations center. Colonel, we just intercepted some concerning chatter. Increased enemy activity in the Ghazni province, specifically around the valley where Captain Anderson's team is deploying. Norbert took the intelligence report, scanning it quickly. How reliable is this? Source confidence is high, ma'am. Signals intelligence suggests they might know we're coming. Foster studied the report over Norbert's shoulder, her mind automatically calculating tactical implications. The enemy positions described in the intercepts would create overlapping fields of fire that would turn the valley into a killing field. Anderson's standard approach would walk them right into the trap. We need to warn Anderson, Ethan said. Norbert looked at Foster, a silent question in her eyes. Foster shook her head slightly. The colonel sighed and handed back the report. Included in the mission briefing, Captain Anderson can make his own tactical decisions. After Ethan left, Foster remained studying the map. He's going to ignore the warning. He'll see it as overcautious intelligence trying to prevent aggressive action. Probably, Norbert agreed. Which is why I'm authorizing you to monitor the operation from here, strictly in an advisory capacity, of course. Foster understood what wasn't being said. If things went catastrophically wrong, she'd be in a position to help, even if it meant breaking her cover. The morning sun painted the mountains surrounding FOB Scorpion in shades of gold and shadow as Anderson's team assembled for their mission briefing. Foster watched from the supply depot as the Rangers loaded their gear, their movements confident and practiced. They were good soldiers, well-trained and experienced, but experience in conventional operations didn't always translate to the kind of warfare they were about to face. Sergeant Connor spotted her watching and nudged Anderson. Look who's checking up on the real soldiers. Anderson glanced over, his expression dismissive. Probably making sure we filled out the right forms for our ammunition. Wouldn't want to violate protocol while we're getting shot at. Foster didn't respond to the provocation. Instead, she approached with a sealed equipment case. Captain Anderson, your specialized equipment request. She handed him the case, which contained the thermal optics and communications gear Henry had mentioned. Anderson took it without thanks, passing it to Private Ryan to stow with their other gear. I suppose you're going to lecture me about proper handling procedures? No, sir. Foster's voice was professionally neutral. But you should know that the satellite communications array has been experiencing intermittent failures in mountainous terrain. Keep your standard radios as backup. Thanks for the tip, Anderson said sarcastically. Any other wisdom from the supply corps? Maybe you want to tell me how to conduct an assault? Foster met his eyes steadily. Just remember that valleys can channel wind in unexpected ways. It affects bullet trajectory at long range and can carry sound further than you'd expect. Connor laughed. She's giving us shooting advice now. That's rich. Still watching? Good, because this is where things get interesting. Share this video with someone who thinks support staff aren't real soldiers, like if you believe every role matters in keeping our troops alive. The briefing concluded with Anderson dismissing the intelligence warnings about increased enemy activity. They always say that, he told his team. If we listened to every cautious intelligence report, we'd never leave the wire. Foster returned to Supply Bunker 3, where she'd established a small monitoring station that wasn't entirely official. Using her supply sergeant credentials, she'd requisitioned communications equipment for inventory tracking purposes that happened to allow her to monitor tactical frequencies. It was a violation of regulations, but regulations had never stopped her when lives were at stake. Specialist Iris appeared in the bunker doorway, looking nervous. Sergeant Foster, I'm sorry to bother you, but I was reviewing some database entries for my intelligence assessment, and I found something strange. Foster looked up from her equipment setup. Strange how? There's a restricted file in the system linked to your service number, but it's locked behind classification levels I can't access. The only thing visible is a designation, Delta 7. Ghost 7. Iris caught herself, clearly having said more than intended. Foster's expression didn't change. Must be a database error. Probably someone with a similar service number. That's what I thought at first, but the metadata shows it was last accessed 2 years ago, right before you were assigned here. And there's a medical file attached that references injuries consistent with... Iris paused, choosing her words carefully. Extensive combat operations. Gunshot wounds, shrapnel damage, trauma consistent with explosive decompression. Specialist. Foster's voice carried a warning edge. Some database errors are better left uncorrected. Understanding? Iris swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, Sergeant. Database error. I'll mark it as a glitch and move on. After the younger woman left, Foster returned to her monitoring station. Anderson's team would be inserting via helicopter in 3 hours. The flight path would take them through several valleys where insurgents had recently increased their presence, according to the intelligence reports Anderson had dismissed. She pulled up the weather data for the region. A storm system was moving in from the west, which would affect visibility and flight conditions. The timing was unfortunate, potentially pushing the operation into a narrow window where conditions would be marginal at best. Lieutenant Ashley from Aviation Weather Services entered the bunker carrying updated meteorological reports. Foster, I know you're tracking supply flights, so I thought you should know there's a weather system moving faster than predicted. It's going to hit the Ghazni province right around the time that ranger team is supposed to be operating. Foster studied the data, her mind calculating how the weather would affect both aviation and ground operations. Wind speeds? Gusting to 40 knots in the valleys. It's going to play hell with helicopter operations. Ashley hesitated. Should we recommend postponing? I'm just supply, Lieutenant. That's an operational decision. Foster's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes remained fixed on the weather data. Ashley left, and Foster continued her preparations. She checked the emergency supply caches she'd personally verified over the past months, memorizing their exact locations and contents. If Anderson's team got into trouble, knowing where the nearest ammunition, medical supplies, and communications equipment were cached could mean the difference between life and death. Master Sergeant Noah appeared in the bunker entrance. Busy morning for a supply sergeant. Foster didn't look up from her work. Inventory doesn't do itself, Master Sergeant. Noah entered uninvited, his eyes taking in the sophisticated monitoring setup. That's some interesting inventory tracking equipment. Looks almost like a tactical operations station. I like to monitor supply convoy movements in real time. Helps with coordination. Uh-huh. Noah picked up one of the tactical maps Foster had annotated with supply cache locations. And these marks showing dead zones in radio coverage? Affects convoy communications. Noah set down the map and studied Foster carefully. You know, I did some more digging into that Ghost 7 reference. Interesting thing about ghosts. They're supposedly dead, but people keep seeing them anyway. Foster finally looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Sometimes people see what they want to see. And sometimes, Noah countered, they see what's actually there, hiding in plain sight. He moved toward the door, then paused. Anderson's an arrogant ass, but he's a good soldier. His team doesn't deserve to die because their leader's too proud to listen to intelligence. Then maybe someone should make him listen. Noah shook his head. He won't. Not from us. But maybe... He trailed off, studying Foster with renewed interest. Maybe someone he'd have to respect could get through to him. After Noah left, Foster returned to her preparations with increased urgency. She couldn't break cover, couldn't reveal who she really was, but she could ensure that if things went wrong, she'd be ready to respond. The helicopter carrying Anderson's team lifted off at 1100 hours, 30 minutes behind schedule due to last-minute equipment adjustments. Foster watched from the control tower's observation deck, having climbed up there on the pretense of verifying supply flight schedules. Through binoculars, she could see Anderson in the lead bird, his expression confident despite the deteriorating weather conditions. "They're flying right into it," muttered Captain Julia, the aviation coordinator standing nearby. "That storm's going to hit them just as they reach the target area." Foster lowered her binoculars. "What's their abort criteria?" Anderson refused to set any, said weather was just another obstacle to overcome. Julia's tone made her opinion of that decision clear. As the helicopters disappeared into the distance, Foster made her way back to the Tactical Operations Center. The main screen showed the aircraft's transponder signals moving toward the valley that had claimed so many lives over the years. She knew every ridge, every potential ambush site, every escape route. Knowledge earned through operations that had nearly killed her more than once. Sergeant Amber, the medical operations coordinator, was updating casualty evacuation protocols when Foster entered. "Foster, what brings you to the TOC?" "Colonel Norbert requested I monitor supply requirements for the operation," Foster replied, taking a position where she could see all the displays. On the main screen, the helicopters were beginning their descent into the valley. Radio chatter was minimal, standard operational communications that suggested everything was proceeding according to plan. But Foster could see what others might miss. The flight path would take them directly over positions where the enemy typically placed observers. "Infiltration in progress," reported the communications specialist. "Team is 30 seconds from touchdown." Foster watched the transponder signals slow and stop at the designated landing zone. For several minutes, everything seemed routine. The team disembarked, established security, and began moving toward their objective. Then the first indication of trouble came through. "Base, this is Ranger 6, Anderson's voice crackled over the radio. "We're observing more activity than expected, counting at least 12 potential hostiles." "Copy, Ranger 6. Do you want to abort?" "Negative. We didn't come all this way to turn around at the first sign of trouble." Foster's jaw tightened. 12 hostiles meant there were probably 3 times that many hidden. The enemy never showed their full strength until they were ready to spring the trap. Military families know the importance of comprehensive life insurance coverage. Specialized military insurance policies now offer deployment bonuses and combat zone provisions that standard policies don't cover. These plans include instant claim processing for beneficiaries and coverage that follows you anywhere in the world, ensuring your family's financial security regardless of where duty calls. 20 minutes into the operation, the situation began deteriorating rapidly. Anderson's team had moved deeper into the valley, following what they believed was an insurgent trail toward a high-value target. Foster recognized the pattern immediately. It was a classic baited trap, designed to draw ambitious commanders into prepared killing fields. "Ranger 6, be advised, you're approaching a known ambush site," the operations officer warned, finally taking the intelligence seriously. "We see it," Anderson replied dismissively. "Just looks like normal terrain to us." Foster stepped forward, unable to remain silent. "Tell them to check their thermal imaging at grid 7394. There's a cave system that doesn't show up on standard maps." The operations officer looked at her questioningly, but relayed the information. Anderson's response was predictable. "Since when do supply sergeants provide tactical advice? We've got this handled." 5 minutes later, all hell broke loose. "Contact! Contact!" Connor's voice exploded over the radio. "Taking fire from multiple directions. Heavy weapons, RPGs." The tactical display lit up with threat indicators as Anderson's team found themselves in a coordinated ambush. Foster had seen this exact scenario play out before. The enemy had let them walk deep into the valley before sealing off their escape routes. "We need immediate fire support," Anderson shouted over the sound of gunfire. "Multiple casualties." Colonel Norbert entered the operations center, taking in the situation with a glance. "What's the status on air support?" "Weather's preventing helicopter insertion," reported Major Daniel, the operations officer. "Fixed wing can't provide close support in those conditions without significant risk to friendly forces." Foster watched the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and probabilities. Anderson's team had taken cover in a depression that provided temporary protection, but no escape routes. The enemy would keep them pinned while moving forces to surround them completely. "They have maybe 30 minutes before they're overrun," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the tense operations center. "How do you figure that?" Major Daniel asked. Foster pointed to the tactical display. "Based on their rate of fire, they'll run out of ammunition in 20 minutes. The enemy knows this. They're not rushing the assault, just maintaining pressure while moving into position. Once the Rangers can't return effective fire, they'll close in. Colonel Norbert studied Foster carefully. And you know this because? Because I've studied this valley extensively, ma'am, for supply route planning purposes. The excuse was transparent, but Norbert didn't challenge it. Instead, she turned to the operations officer. Options? Quick reaction force is 45 minutes out. Weather's preventing faster insertion. That's too long, Foster said, forgetting to maintain her cover. They need support now, or there won't be anyone left to rescue. Anderson's voice came over the radio again, the stress now evident. We're down to 50% ammunition. Ryan's hit bad, losing blood. We need extraction immediately. Foster looked at Colonel Norbert, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Moving to a side terminal, Foster pulled up files she wasn't supposed to have. Detailed terrain analysis, cache locations, and alternative routes that didn't appear in standard military databases. There's a supply cache at grid 7412, she said. Pre-positioned for emergency resupply. It's 300 meters from their position, but they'd have to fight through enemy positions to reach it. How do you know about emergency caches that aren't in our system? Major Daniel demanded. Because I put them there, Foster replied, abandoning pretense. Unauthorized, using excess supplies that were written off as training expenditure. The operations center fell silent except for the continuing radio chatter from Anderson's team. Their situation was deteriorating by the minute. Ranger 6, Foster said, taking the radio handset before anyone could stop her. This is supply operations. There's a cache 300 meters northwest of your position, marked by 3 white rocks in a triangle formation. Ammunition, medical supplies, and emergency communications equipment. Anderson's response was incredulous, even through the gunfire. Foster, what the hell are you doing on this frequency? Trying to keep you alive, Captain. The cache is real. I placed it there myself. You? When have you ever been to this valley? Foster glanced at Colonel Norbert, who nodded permission. 2 years ago. Different circumstances. Trust me or don't, but you're running out of options. There was a pause filled with gunfire and shouted orders. Then Anderson came back. We can't reach it. Too many hostiles between us and that position. Foster studied the tactical display, her mind shifting into a mode she'd tried to bury. You don't all go. Send 2 people, your fastest runners. The enemy's focused on your main position. Use smoke for concealment. Move through the dead zone at grid 7400. There's a depression in the terrain that's not on your maps, provides cover from the northern ridge. How could you possibly know that? Because I've used it before. Captain, you have maybe 10 minutes before they complete their encirclement. Move now or die there. The operations center held its breath as Anderson made his decision. On the tactical display, 2 blue indicators separated from the main group, moving rapidly toward the cache location. Foster watched their progress, unconsciously holding her breath as they navigated the route she'd described. Holy, Foster, the cache is here. Connor's voice came over the radio. Never mind. Loading up now. But even as Connor and Liam secured the additional supplies, Foster could see the enemy responding, shifting forces to cut off their return route. The tactical situation was evolving faster than Anderson could adapt to it. They're moving to cut you off, Foster warned. Connor, Liam, don't return the direct route. Move east through the ravine, then circle back. There's a rock formation that provides overwatch position at grid 7398. The 2 Rangers followed her directions without question now, their skepticism overridden by survival instinct. As they moved through the terrain Foster described, avoiding enemy positions with uncanny precision, the atmosphere in the operations center shifted from crisis management to something approaching awe. Foster, Colonel Norbert said quietly, you're not really a supply sergeant, are you? Foster kept her eyes on the tactical display. I am now, ma'am. That's all I can be. But even as she said it, Foster knew her carefully constructed cover was crumbling. The knowledge she was displaying, the tactical expertise, the familiarity with terrain that shouldn't be familiar, it all pointed to a truth she'd spent 2 years trying to bury. Connor and Liam made it back to the defensive position with the additional supplies, buying Anderson's team precious time. But Foster could see on the tactical display that this was only a temporary reprieve. The enemy forces were consolidating, preparing for a final assault that would overwhelm the Rangers regardless of their ammunition status. Ranger 6, this is Foster. The enemy's preparing a three-pronged assault. They'll hit you from the north and east simultaneously, while a third force moves through the southern approach to cut off any retreat. Anderson's response was strained. How can you see their movements? We don't have eyes on half these positions. Thermal satellite imagery, Foster lied smoothly. The truth, that she recognized the tactical pattern from having seen it executed before, would raise too many questions. You need to break contact now, while they're still positioning. Negative. Ryan can't move fast enough, and we don't leave anyone behind. Foster felt something cold settle in her chest. It was the same code she'd lived by, the same principle that had nearly gotten her killed on that last mission. But honor and survival didn't always align, and sometimes the mathematics of war demanded terrible choices. Then you need to create a distraction, she said. Something that disrupts their coordination long enough to extract your wounded. Major Daniel interrupted. Foster, you're exceeding your authority. Stand down and let operational personnel handle this. Foster turned to face him, and something in her expression made the Major take an involuntary step back. Sir, with respect, operational personnel aren't providing solutions. I am. You're a supply sergeant. I'm someone who knows this terrain and these tactics. Foster turned back to the radio. Captain Anderson, there's a fuel depot the insurgents use at grid 7455. It's hidden but vulnerable. One precise shot would create enough chaos to disrupt their assault. We don't have line of sight to that grid. You do from the eastern rise. Send your best marksman. 800-meter shot, but achievable. Anderson was silent for a moment. Then, Foster, who are you really? Before she could respond, Corporal Ethan burst into the operations center. Ma'am, I've managed to unlock part of that restricted file. You need to see this. On his tablet was a partially decoded military record. Most of it was still redacted, but visible portions showed extraordinary commendations. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters, and at the bottom a single line that made everyone in the room freeze. Operator Ghost 7, 47 successful extractions. Status, deceased, official, reassigned, actual. Colonel Norbert took the tablet, studying it before looking at Foster. 47 successful extractions, including the Kandahar 13, the Helmand recovery, and Operation Nightfall. The names meant something to everyone in the room. These were legendary operations, the kind that were studied in advanced tactical courses, but with most details classified beyond even senior officer access. That's impossible, Major Daniel said. Ghost 7 died in a cave-in during a classified operation 2 years ago. Ghost 7 was supposed to die, Foster corrected quietly. It was the only way to protect the intelligence I'd uncovered about compromised personnel in our command structure. The revelation should have been dramatic, but Foster delivered it with the same calm she'd shown while being humiliated in the mess hall. On the radio, Anderson's team was running out of time, and that mattered more than her exposed identity. Ranger 6, she continued, as if nothing had happened. Status on that shot? Connor's in position. Fox 3, target destroyed. Holy, the whole valley just lit up. On the tactical display, Foster could see the enemy positions wavering, their coordinated assault disrupted by the unexpected explosion. Move now, Captain, southeast through the wash. It looks exposed, but there's dead ground that'll conceal you from the ridgelines. Foster, I need to know. Are you really Ghost 7? Does it matter right now, Captain? Yeah. Anderson's voice was different now, humbled. It does. Because if you are, then I've been the biggest fool on this base. You can apologize if you survive. Now move. As Anderson's team began their extraction, Foster turned to find the entire operations center staring at her. Some faces showed awe, others disbelief, but Colonel Norbert's expression was one of grim satisfaction. "I knew who you were the day you arrived," Norbert said. "Your handler at JSOC briefed me privately. You were supposed to have 18 months to decompress, to heal from what happened." "Plans change, ma'am." On the tactical display, Anderson's team was making progress, but Foster could see enemy forces regrouping faster than expected. The explosion had bought time, not victory. "They're adapting," she announced. "Secondary force moving to intercept at grid 7422. Quick reaction force is still 20 minutes out," Major Daniel reported, his earlier antagonism replaced by professional focus. Foster studied the display, her mind calculating possibilities. There was one option, but it would completely destroy her cover and potentially put her back on the radar of people who thought she was dead. "Colonel, I need to borrow a vehicle and some equipment." Norbert's eyes narrowed. "Foster, you're not operational anymore. Your injuries have healed enough." Foster moved toward the door. "Anderson's team has 11 minutes before that secondary force cuts them off. The QRF has 20. Do the math." "I can't authorize." "Then don't." Foster paused at the door. "Just don't stop me either." She left before anyone could respond, moving through the base with purpose that drew attention from everyone she passed. The supply sergeant who had been invisible for 2 years was suddenly very visible, and the transformation was remarkable. In the motor pool, she found Sergeant Willow preparing a Humvee for routine patrol. "I need this vehicle, Sergeant." Willow looked at her uncertainly. "Sergeant Foster, I can't just—" "Check with Colonel Norbert if you want, but I'm leaving in 30 seconds with or without authorization." Something in Foster's tone made Willow step aside. Foster climbed into the driver's seat, her hands automatically checking weapon mounts and communications equipment. It had been 2 years since she'd driven combat operations, but muscle memory didn't forget. As she started the engine, Staff Sergeant Henry appeared with a weapons case. "Thought you might need this," he said, loading it into the vehicle. "It's the rifle you've been maintaining during inventory, the one you zero every week when you think no one's watching." Foster looked at him in surprise. Henry smiled grimly. "I've been around long enough to recognize an operator maintaining proficiency. Good hunting, Ghost 7. The base gates opened without challenge. Colonel Norbert had apparently made a call. Foster drove into the dust storm that was building outside the wire, heading toward a valley that held too many memories and might be about to claim more lives. On the radio, she could hear Anderson's team struggling. They were moving, but too slowly, and the enemy was closing in. "Ranger 6, this is Ghost 7, she said, finally using the call sign she'd buried. "I'm 8 minutes out from your position." "Ghost 7? Anderson's voice was shocked. "Foster?" "Save the surprise for later, Captain. I need you to push toward grid 7400. I know you're tired, I know Ryan's hurt, but you need to make that position. That's open ground. We'll be exposed. Trust me." Those 2 words carried weight that her rank never could. Anderson had spent the morning mocking a supply sergeant, but Ghost 7 was legend. Ghost 7 had done the impossible 47 times. "Roger, Ghost 7, we're moving." Foster pushed the Humvee harder, the vehicle bouncing over rough terrain as she took routes that weren't on any map. These were paths she'd memorized during long nights studying the valley, preparing for contingencies that most people never considered. 5 minutes out, she could see the dust clouds from gunfire exchanges. Anderson's team had made the open ground, but they were taking fire from multiple positions. The enemy had adapted to their movement faster than anticipated. "I see you, Ranger 6. 60 seconds. She brought the Humvee over a rise at dangerous speed, the vehicle briefly airborne before slamming back down. Below, she could see Anderson's team pinned in the open ground, exactly where she'd told them to go. To anyone watching, it looked like she'd led them into a death trap, but Foster knew something the enemy didn't. The open ground had a geographic depression invisible from the ridgelines, created by seasonal water flow. It provided just enough cover if you knew exactly where to position yourself. She'd discovered it during a reconnaissance mission that didn't officially exist. The Humvee roared into the valley, drawing immediate fire from enemy positions. Foster drove with one hand while reaching for the rifle Henry had loaded. The weapon was perfectly maintained, exactly as she'd left it during her last inventory check. She brought the vehicle into a controlled slide, using its bulk to provide additional cover for Anderson's team. Before the dust settled, she was out of the driver's seat, rifle in hand, muscle memory taking over completely. The first shot took out a machine gun position 400 meters away. The second eliminated a spotter who'd been directing mortar fire. By the third shot, enemy forces were scrambling to respond to this new threat. Ghost 7 engaging multiple targets, she announced with clinical detachment. Ranger 6, prepare to load wounded. Anderson appeared beside her, his face a mixture of awe and shame. Ghost 7, apologize later, Captain. Help me lay down suppressing fire. They worked in synchronization, Foster calling out targets with the precision of someone who'd memorized every potential fighting position in the valley. Her shots were economical, precise, each one disrupting enemy coordination and creating gaps in their coverage. Connor dragged Ryan to the Humvee while Liam and Private Oliver provided cover fire. Oliver, the newest member of the team, kept staring at Foster as if unable to reconcile the supply sergeant with the warrior beside him. Stop gawking, Private, Foster said without looking at him. Watch your sector. Yes, ma'am. Sergeant, Just shoot straight, Private. The enemy fire intensified as they realized their prey was escaping. RPGs began impacting around the vehicle, showering them with dirt and debris. Foster counted ammunition in her head, calculating how long they could maintain their position. QRF is 5 minutes out, Colonel Norbert's voice came over the radio. Can you hold? Foster looked at their ammunition supplies, at Ryan bleeding in the back of the Humvee, at the enemy forces massing for another assault. The math wasn't good. Negative. We need to move now. She made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who didn't know the valley's secrets. Everyone in the vehicle. We're running the gauntlet. Anderson stared at her. Through their lines? That's suicide! No, it's Tuesday. The response came automatically, a joke from her operational days that made no sense to anyone who hadn't been there. Trust me, Captain, I've done this before. Before the big reveal, tell us, have you ever been underestimated because of your job title? Comment below. And remember, subscribing costs nothing but helps these important stories reach more people. They loaded into the Humvee, Foster taking the driver's seat with Anderson riding shotgun. She gunned the engine, driving directly toward what appeared to be the heaviest concentration of enemy forces. Foster, what are you doing? Connor shouted from the back. There's a ravine that doesn't show on satellite imagery, Foster said, yanking the wheel hard left at the last second. The enemy doesn't know about it because they never operated here during flash flood season. The Humvee plunged into what looked like solid ground but was actually a concealed drop into a water-carved channel. Enemy fire passed overhead, the shooters unable to depress their weapons enough to track the vehicle in the ravine. Foster navigated the narrow channel with impossible precision, the Humvee's sides scraping rock walls as she threaded between obstacles that would have destroyed the vehicle if hit at speed. It was the kind of driving that required absolute knowledge of every turn, every rock, every variation in width. How? Anderson asked, gripping the dashboard. Because I spent 6 weeks living in this valley during an operation that never happened, Foster replied, taking another impossible turn at speed that should have flipped the vehicle. Hunting someone who knew the terrain as well as the locals, I had to become better than them. They erupted from the ravine 2 kilometers from where they'd entered, completely behind enemy lines. The hostile forces were still firing at their last known position, unaware their targets had vanished like ghosts. 10 minutes later, they linked up with the quick reaction force. As medics worked on Ryan and the other wounded, Anderson approached Foster, who was standing apart from the group, staring back at the valley. Foster, Ghost 7, I don't even know what to call you. Foster's fine. Ghost 7 died 2 years ago. Anderson was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology. More than that. I owe you my life. My team's lives. Foster turned to look at him. You owe me nothing, Captain. This is what I do, what I did. The way I treated you, the things I said, you didn't know. But I should have recognized something. The way you moved, the knowledge you had. I was so wrapped up in my own ego that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Foster's expression softened slightly. That was the point, Captain. If an arrogant Ranger team leader couldn't see through my cover, then neither could the people who want me dead. Who wants you dead? Foster didn't answer directly. Let's just say that my last mission uncovered things that powerful people wanted to stay buried. The kind of things that get operators erased from existence. The ride back to FOB Scorpion was subdued. Anderson's team sat in silence, processing both their near-death experience and the revelation about Foster. Private Oliver finally worked up the courage to speak. Sergeant Foster, the 47 extractions, were they all like this? No, Foster replied quietly. Some were worse. As they approached the base, Foster could see a crowd gathering. Word had spread about both the successful extraction and her revealed identity. The supply sergeant who'd been dismissed and mocked was suddenly the most famous person on the base. But in the crowd, Foster also saw faces she recognized for different reasons. Intelligence officers who shouldn't have been at a forward operating base. Security personnel whose presence suggested her cover wasn't just blown locally, but had attracted attention from much higher up the command chain. This is about to get complicated, she murmured. The vehicle hadn't even stopped before Colonel Norbert approached, accompanied by someone Foster recognized with a chill of apprehension, General Patricia Hayes, head of Joint Special Operations Command. Sergeant Foster, the general said formally, or should I say, Lieutenant Colonel Foster? The gathered crowd gasped. Foster had been an officer, and a senior one at that, before her death and reassignment. That rank doesn't exist anymore, General, Foster replied, climbing out of the vehicle. On the contrary, your commission was never revoked, just classified. You've been on special assignment. The general's voice carried loud enough for everyone to hear. An assignment that appears to be over. Foster felt the weight of every eye on her. 2 years of careful anonymity destroyed in a single morning. But looking at Ryan being carried on a stretcher, alive because of her intervention, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Ma'am, these men would have died if I hadn't acted. I'm not criticizing your decision, Colonel. I'm saying it's time to stop hiding. The general turned to address the crowd. What you're looking at is one of the most decorated special operators in U.S. military history. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Foster, formerly known as Ghost 7, has 47 confirmed successful extractions in situations deemed impossible by conventional assessment. She's been awarded the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, and has been recommended for the Medal of Honor for actions in Afghanistan that remain classified. The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. Her death 2 years ago was necessary to protect ongoing intelligence operations and her own life after she uncovered a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership. Her cover as a supply sergeant was designed to keep her safe while that conspiracy was dismantled. Foster stood at attention, her face expressionless as her carefully constructed world dissolved around her. She could feel the stares of everyone who'd dismissed her, mocked her, overlooked her for 2 years. Anderson stepped forward. General, then this morning in the mess hall, when I... He stopped, unable to continue. When you publicly humiliated one of our finest warriors because you couldn't see past your own assumptions? General Hayes's voice was sharp. Yes, Captain, we're aware. Colonel Norbert has been sending me regular reports on how Lieutenant Colonel Foster has been treated here. Anderson's face flushed red. I request the opportunity to make this right, ma'am. That's not up to me. The general looked at Foster. Colonel, Captain Anderson's actions this morning would constitute conduct unbecoming at minimum. What's your recommendation? Foster looked at Anderson, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. Then she looked at his team, Connor, Liam, Oliver, all standing at attention, their expressions mixing shame with awe. Captain Anderson is a good officer who made assumptions based on incomplete information, Foster said carefully. His treatment of support personnel reflects a cultural problem in our military that values combat roles over support functions. I recommend education, not punishment. Education? The general asked. Yes, ma'am. Captain Anderson and his team should spend 30 days working in supply, learning exactly how critical logistics is to combat operations. They should understand that every role, from the clerk who processes ammunition requests to the mechanic who maintains vehicles, is essential to mission success. Anderson nodded immediately. I accept that recommendation gladly. Veterans transitioning to civilian careers are discovering accelerated online degree programs designed specifically for military experience. These programs convert military training into college credits and offer flexible scheduling for active duty personnel. With specialized career counseling and veteran-only cohorts, these educational pathways help warriors become leaders in corporate battlefields. The crowd began dispersing slowly, but the atmosphere on the base had fundamentally changed. Foster could feel it in the way people looked at her, no longer dismissive but uncertain, as if they didn't know how to interact with someone whose true identity had been so dramatically revealed. In the Tactical Operations Center, Foster found herself alone with Colonel Norbert and General Hayes. The general activated a security protocol that ensured their conversation couldn't be monitored. Rachel, the general said, using her first name for the first time. The conspiracy you uncovered has been largely dismantled. 3 generals, 2 intelligence officials, and a defense contractor have been quietly prosecuted. The threat to your life has been significantly reduced. Significantly isn't completely, Foster observed. No, the general agreed. Which is why I'm offering you a choice. You can return to operational status with a new identity, continue your work as Ghost 7 under a different designation. Or you can officially retire with full honors and benefits, your record cleared and commendations public. Foster was quiet for a long moment. There's a third option. Oh? I stay here, not as Foster the supply sergeant, but as Lieutenant Colonel Foster, logistics and special operations trainer. These people need to understand that support and combat aren't separate worlds, but parts of the same machine. Colonel Norbert smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The general considered. It would mean your identity becoming fully public. The media will have a field day with the story of Ghost 7. Let them. Maybe it'll help people understand that heroes don't always look like what they expect. Over the next several hours, the base transformed around Foster. Her small office in the supply depot was replaced with a proper command office. Her uniform suddenly bore the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel. But more importantly, the way people interacted with her completely changed. Specialist Iris approached nervously. Colonel Foster? I wanted to apologize for digging into your files. I didn't mean to. You did exactly what a good intelligence analyst should do, Foster interrupted. You noticed anomalies and investigated them. Never apologize for doing your job well. Master Sergeant Noah found her reviewing the after-action report from the morning's events. Colonel, I had my suspicions about you for weeks. The way you handled weapons, your tactical knowledge. I should have trusted my instincts. Your instincts were right, Master Sergeant, and you tried to warn Anderson, which showed good judgment and moral courage. He's taking his reassignment to supply seriously, Noah said with a slight smile. I saw him actually reading logistics manuals an hour ago. People can learn, Foster replied. Even arrogant rangers. That evening, Foster stood on the roof of the Tactical Operations Center, watching the sun set over the mountains, the same mountains that had nearly claimed Anderson's team, that held so many secrets and memories from her years of operations. Anderson joined her, having sought her out specifically. Colonel, I've been thinking about what you said, about every role being essential. And? You were right. I've been in the military for 12 years, and I never once thanked the supply sergeant who made sure I had ammunition, the mechanic who kept my vehicles running, or the intel analyst who warned me about ambushes. I was so focused on being a warrior that I forgot warriors need support to survive. Foster nodded slowly. It's a common blind spot. We train soldiers to be aggressive, confident, even arrogant because those qualities help in combat. But they also create divisions between those who fight and those who support the fight. You did both. I did, and I learned that pulling a trigger is the easy part. Making sure the right person has the right weapon with the right ammunition at the right time, that's the hard part. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Anderson spoke again. The 47 extractions. Will you tell me about them someday? Maybe. Some stories are better left classified. And the 48th? The one that got you killed? Foster's expression darkened. That one stays buried, for everyone's safety. A week passed. Anderson's team threw themselves into their supply duties with unexpected enthusiasm, learning the complex systems that kept combat forces operational. Foster established a new training program that brought combat and support personnel together, breaking down the barriers that had kept them separate. But the peaceful routine was shattered when Foster received a call on a secure satellite phone she'd kept hidden even from Colonel Norbert. The voice on the other end was electronically distorted but familiar. "Ghost 7, we have a problem." Foster's blood chilled. This was her former handler from a unit that didn't officially exist. "I'm retired, remember? Dead, actually. Death is negotiable in our business. We need you. Not interested. Omega Team is missing." The words hit Foster like a physical blow. Omega Team was her old unit, the people she'd operated with for 5 years before that final catastrophic mission. "That's impossible. Omega was disbanded after I died." "Officially, yes. Unofficially, they continued operating. They were investigating residual elements of the conspiracy you uncovered. 3 days ago, they went dark in Syria." Foster closed her eyes. "Who's on the team?" The handler listed 5 names, each one a knife to Foster's heart. These weren't just colleagues. They were family. People who'd bled with her, saved her life, people she'd thought were safe after her sacrifice. They were following leads about Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb. Foster's eyes snapped open. Webb had been her commanding officer on that final mission, the one who'd ordered her into the cave system where she'd discovered the conspiracy. He was supposed to be dead, killed in the same cave-in that had claimed Ghost 7. Webb's alive? Apparently, and he's got Omega Team. Foster ended the call and stood frozen for a moment. Her old life, the one she'd tried to bury, was pulling her back. But this time, it wasn't about duty or country. It was personal. She found Colonel Norbert in her office. "Ma'am, I need to request immediate leave." Norbert studied her face. "This is about that phone call, isn't it? The encrypted one you thought I didn't know about?" Foster wasn't surprised. Norbert had proven repeatedly that very little happened on her base without her knowledge. "My old team is in trouble, ma'am. I have to help them." "The team that officially doesn't exist?" "Yes, ma'am." Norbert was quiet for a moment. "You know that the moment you leave this base as Ghost 7, you can't come back as Foster. Your cover here will be permanently blown." "I know. And you're going anyway." "They're family, ma'am. They came for me when everyone else wrote me off as dead. I owe them the same." Norbert opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "Then you'll need these. Your operational credentials, reactivated as of..." She checked her watch. 5 minutes ago. General Hayes anticipated this might happen. Foster looked at the credentials. Full reinstatement, unlimited operational authority, and a designation that made her blood run cold. Ghost 7. Active. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me yet. Anderson's team wants to go with you." Foster looked up sharply. "What?" "They feel they owe you a debt. Anderson made a compelling argument that his Rangers could support your operation. This isn't their fight. Neither was theirs yours, but you saved them anyway." Foster considered this. Omega Team was 5 operators against unknown opposition. Anderson's team would provide additional firepower, and despite his arrogance, Anderson was a skilled tactical leader. They don't know what they're volunteering for. Then you'd better brief them. 2 hours later, Foster stood in a secure briefing room facing Anderson's team. They'd all volunteered without knowing the mission details, which either showed impressive loyalty or dangerous stupidity. "What you're volunteering for is completely black," Foster began. "No official support, no recognition if things go wrong. You'll be ghosts operating in denied territory against an enemy that shouldn't exist." "We're in," Anderson said immediately. "You didn't let me finish. The target is a rogue American officer who's holding American operators hostage. We'll be operating in Syria, in territory controlled by multiple hostile forces. The probability of survival is low." Connor spoke up. "Colonel, 2 days ago we were dead until you showed up. Whatever debt you think you paid by saving us, we owe you the same." Liam nodded. "Besides, someone needs to watch your six. Even ghosts need backup." Private Oliver, the youngest, looked nervous but determined. "I joined the military to make a difference, ma'am. This sounds like a difference worth making." Foster studied each of them. They were good men, sincere in their desire to help. But sincerity wouldn't keep them alive in what was coming. "If you come with me, you follow my orders absolutely. No questions, no hesitation. Where we're going, a second's delay could get everyone killed." "Understood," Anderson said. "When do we leave?" 3 hours. Pack light, weapons and ammunition only. Leave anything that could identify you as American military." As they prepared to leave, Foster found herself back on the roof of the operations center. The base below bustled with activity, unaware that their recently revealed Ghost 7 was about to disappear again, this time perhaps permanently. Sergeant Amber, the medic, found her there. "Colonel, I heard you're leaving." "News travels fast. I wanted to thank you, not just for this morning, but for the past 2 years. You could have revealed yourself at any time, claimed the respect you deserved, but you didn't. You just quietly did your job and kept us all alive with your hidden work." "That's what ghosts do, Sergeant. We work in the shadows so others can live in the light." Amber handed her a small medical kit. "For your mission. It's configured based on your medical history from your file. The real file, not the supply sergeant one." Foster took the kit, touched by the gesture. "Thank you." "Come back alive, Colonel. This place needs people like you." 3 hours later, an unmarked helicopter lifted off from FOB Scorpion carrying Foster and Anderson's team. They flew into the darkness toward Syria, toward a confrontation with ghosts from Foster's past. "Colonel," Anderson said over the helicopter's intercom, "that 48th mission, was Webb involved?" Foster looked out at the dark landscape passing below. "Webb was the reason for it. He ordered me into that cave system knowing it was a trap. He wanted me to die there, but I survived and found evidence of his treason. The conspiracy I uncovered started with him. And now he has your old team. Yes, he's using them as bait, knowing I'll come." "It's a trap, then?" Foster checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. "Of course it's a trap, but sometimes the only way to break a trap is to spring it." Anderson was quiet for a moment. "We could call for backup. General Hayes would provide resources." "No. This ends between Webb and me. It started in a cave 2 years ago, and it'll finish in whatever hole he's hiding in now." As the helicopter flew through the night, Foster allowed herself one moment of reflection. 2 years ago, she'd accepted her death as necessary, had embraced being a forgotten supply sergeant as penance for the operators she couldn't save. But Ghost 7 had never really died. She'd just been waiting, hiding in plain sight, until needed again. The satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. Coordinates in Syria, a location that made Foster's blood run cold. She recognized it, an abandoned chemical facility that had been used for black operations before being officially decommissioned. Webb had chosen his ground well. "ETA 4 hours, the pilot announced. Foster looked at Anderson's team, these rangers who'd mocked her just days ago and were now following her into hell based solely on respect earned through action. "Get some rest," she told them. "When we land, we'll be moving fast." But she didn't sleep. Instead, she studied satellite imagery of the target location, planned ingress and egress routes, and tried not to think about the fact that she was flying toward a confrontation she'd spent 2 years avoiding. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a voice message, and hearing it made her stomach clench. It was Mike Titan Thompson, Omega Team's leader and one of her closest friends from her operational days. 7. If you're hearing this, you're walking into exactly what Webb wants. But we both know you'll come anyway. The team's alive, but compromised. Webb did something to us, some kind of drug. We can't resist his commands. He's going to use us against you. Don't trust what you see. And 7, if you have to choose between stopping Webb and saving us, you stop Webb. That's an order from your old team leader. Omega out. Foster played the message again, analyzing every word. Compromised. Drugged. Unable to resist. Webb had turned her own team into weapons against her. It was exactly the kind of psychological warfare he excelled at. Problem? Anderson asked, noting her expression. The situation's more complex than expected. Webb has done something to Omega Team. They might attack us. Your own people? Not by choice. He's controlling them somehow. Anderson absorbed this. Changes the tactical situation significantly. Yes, we can't use lethal force against them, but they'll be trying to kill us. Any ideas? Foster pulled out the medical kit Amber had given her. Inside, along with standard supplies, were several auto-injectors with sedatives. We put them down temporarily, break Webb's control, then deal with him. Simple plan. The best ones usually are. The helicopter began its descent toward a landing zone 5 miles from the target. As they prepared to disembark, Foster felt the familiar pre-mission calm settling over her. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd excelled at for years before bureaucracy and conspiracy forced her underground. Remember, she told Anderson's team as they performed final equipment checks, Webb knows I'm coming. He's had 2 years to plan this. Expect traps, expect deception, and above all, trust nothing you see until verified. They moved out into the Syrian darkness, 5 Rangers led by a ghost who'd already died once. The abandoned facility waited in the distance, lights flickering in windows that should have been dark for years. Ghost 7, this is Omega Lead. The voice over her radio made Foster's heart skip. It was Titan, but something was wrong with his tone. Flat, emotionless. We're waiting for you, 7. Webb says to tell you that the game ends where it began. Cave entrance, northern side. Come alone, or we execute the others. Foster keyed her radio. Titan, fight it. Fight. Whatever he's done to you, fight it. Can't. Fight. Too strong. Hurry, 7. He's impatient. The transmission ended. Foster looked at Anderson. It's definitely a trap. Obviously, so what's the plan? Foster studied the facility through her scope. She could see movement in the windows, her old team positioned as sentries. They moved wrong, too mechanical, lacking the fluid grace that had made Omega Team legendary. We split up. You and your team create a diversion from the south. Draw them out, but don't engage lethally. I'll infiltrate from the north, find Webb. And if Omega Team tries to kill you? Foster's expression was grim. Then I'll do what I've always done. Survive. They separated, Anderson's team moving into position for their diversionary assault. Foster circled north, every step taking her closer to a confrontation 2 years in the making. The cave entrance was exactly as she remembered from intelligence photos, a jagged hole in the facility's foundation that led to natural caverns below. It was where Webb had tried to have her killed 2 years ago, where she'd discovered evidence of his treason while fighting for her life in the darkness. She entered carefully, weapon ready, senses alert for any trap. The cave was lit by chemical glow sticks, creating an eerie green ambiance that made everything look diseased. Welcome home, Ghost 7. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb stepped from the shadows, looking exactly as she remembered. Tall, lean, with the kind of sharp features that suggested cruelty even when he smiled. He wore civilian clothes now, but carried himself with military bearing. "Webb," Foster kept her weapon trained on him. "Let Omega Team go. This is between us." "Oh, but they're part of it now. You see, after you died, I needed new test subjects for my enhanced soldier program. Who better than your old team? They volunteered to look for you, believing you might still be alive. Such loyalty, such stupidity." Behind Webb, 5 figures emerged from the darkness. Omega Team, but wrong. Their eyes were dilated, movements too precise, too synchronized. They raised their weapons in perfect unison, all aimed at Foster. "The drug I've developed creates perfect soldiers," Webb continued. "No fear, no hesitation, absolute obedience. The Pentagon will pay billions for this formula once I demonstrate its effectiveness. And what better demonstration than having Ghost 7's own team kill her?" Foster looked at her friends' faces, searching for any sign of the people she knew. Titan, the big Texan who'd saved her life in Iraq. Phoenix, the sniper who never missed. Wraith, the demolitions expert with a laugh that could lift anyone's spirits. Valkyrie, the medic who'd kept them all alive through impossible situations. And Ronan, the quiet one who spoke through actions rather than words. "Mike," she said, addressing Titan directly, "remember Kandahar. Remember what you told me about fighting from the inside when the outside battle was lost." Titan's finger tightened on the trigger, but there was a flicker in his eyes. Just for a moment, the real man fought through. "Eliminate her," Webb commanded. The cave erupted in gunfire. Foster dove behind a rock formation as bullets shattered stone around her. But the shooting was slightly off, aimed to force her into cover rather than kill. Her team was fighting Webb's control, creating margins of error that kept her alive. Outside, she could hear Anderson's diversion beginning, explosions and gunfire drawing Webb's other forces away from the cave. It wouldn't last long, but it might be enough. Foster moved through the cave with desperate precision, using every piece of cover while trying not to hurt her own people. She fired warning shots, forcing them to reposition, buying time while looking for an opening. "You always were too sentimental," Webb called out. "That's why you had to die. You couldn't see the bigger picture, the necessity of sacrifice for advancement." "You mean selling out to the highest bidder?" Foster responded, moving again as bullets tracked her movement. "I mean evolution. Wars aren't won by honor anymore. They're won by whoever has the best technology, the most controlled soldiers. My formula will revolutionize warfare." Foster saw her chance. Phoenix had moved to flank her, but his approach was too direct, lacking his usual tactical brilliance. The drug might control actions, but it couldn't replicate instinct. She waited until he was close, then struck with the sedative injector, catching him in the neck. He collapsed immediately. "One down," Webb said, seemingly amused. "4 to go, then you." But Foster had learned something important. The drug made them obedient but predictable. They couldn't adapt, couldn't innovate. They were following Webb's commands literally, without the tactical flexibility that had made Omega Team elite. She used this knowledge, predicting their movements and systematically taking them down with sedatives. Wraith fell next, then Valkyrie. Ronan lasted longer, his natural stealth still partially effective even under chemical control, but eventually she caught him too. That left Titan, her old team leader, the strongest and most resistant to the drug's effects. "Mike, I know you're in there," Foster said, facing him across the cave. "Fight it. You're stronger than any chemical." Titan's whole body trembled with effort, the war between drug and will visible in every muscle. His weapon wavered between pointing at Foster and pointing at Webb. "Shoot her!" Webb commanded, his voice losing its calm confidence. "Can't," Titan managed through gritted teeth. "Won't hurt family." With enormous effort, Titan turned his weapon toward Webb. The colonel's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible. The formula is perfect." "Nothing's perfect," Foster said, moving closer to Webb. especially not your plan to use my people as weapons." Webb pulled his own weapon, but Foster was faster. A single shot to his shoulder spun him around, sending his pistol flying. He collapsed against the cave wall, blood spreading across his shirt. "You could have been great," he gasped. "We could have changed everything." "We did change everything," Foster replied. "Just not the way you wanted." Outside, the gunfire was dying down. Anderson's voice came over the radio. "Ghost 7, facility secured. Multiple prisoners, no casualties." "Copy. I need medical support in the cave. 5 sedated friendlies and 1 wounded prisoner." As medical teams arrived and began treating Omega Team, Foster stood over Webb. He looked smaller now, just a bitter man whose ambitions had cost so many lives. "The formula," he said weakly. "Others will recreate it. You can't stop progress." "Maybe not," Foster agreed. "But I can stop you." General Hayes arrived 12 hours later, along with a full decontamination team. Omega Team had recovered from the sedatives and were undergoing treatment to clear Webb's drug from their systems. The facility was systematically destroyed, all research and samples eliminated. "Lieutenant Colonel Foster," the general said formally, "you've exceeded all expectations, again." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "Your job was being a supply sergeant at FOB Scorpion." Foster smiled slightly. "That was my cover, not my job." The general studied her. "So what now? Back to being Foster, the supply sergeant?" "No, ma'am. That cover's blown permanently. Besides," she looked at Anderson's team, who were joking with the recovering Omega Team members, "I think I found a new mission." "Oh?" "Training. Real training that brings together special operations and support, combat and logistics, breaking down the barriers that keep our forces divided." "And Omega Team?" Foster looked at her old teammates. Titan gave her a thumbs up, his strength returning. "They'll need time to recover, to process what happened. But they're survivors. They'll adapt." "Like ghosts do?" "Exactly like ghosts do." 1 month later, Foster stood in a classroom at Fort Bragg, facing 40 soldiers from various specialties. Combat arms sat next to supply clerks, special operators beside intelligence analysts. It was the first integrated training program of its kind. "Welcome to the Ghost program," she began. "Not because you'll become special operators, but because you'll learn to be invisible forces that keep our military alive. Every role matters. Every specialty contributes. The supply sergeant, who ensures ammunition reaches the front lines, is as important as the soldier firing it. The mechanic who maintains vehicles is as critical as the driver. The intelligence analyst who warns about ambushes saves as many lives as the medic treating wounds." In the front row, Anderson sat taking notes, his rangers mixed among the support personnel. The arrogance was gone, replaced by genuine respect for every person in the room. "Over the next 8 weeks, you'll cross-train in each other's specialties. Combat personnel will learn logistics. Support staff will learn basic combat skills. Everyone will understand how their piece fits into the larger machine." A hand raised in the back. It was Oliver, who'd been promoted after the Syria mission. "Colonel Foster, what's the most important lesson you've learned from being both Ghost 7 and a supply sergeant?" Foster considered the question. "That strength isn't always visible. The most powerful person in a room might be the one everyone overlooks. The real warriors aren't always the ones with the most medals or the loudest voices. Sometimes they're the quiet ones making sure everyone else can do their jobs." After class, Foster found herself in her office, looking at 2 photographs on her desk. One showed Ghost 7 with Omega Team, faces obscured but camaraderie evident. The other showed Sergeant Foster in the supply depot at FOB Scorpion, quietly doing the work that kept soldiers alive. The satellite phone rang, a number she recognized but hadn't expected. "Colonel Foster?" "Colonel, this is Secretary of Defense Williams. I've been briefed on your recent operations and your new training initiative. I want to expand it, make it mandatory across all branches." "That's ambitious, Mr. Secretary." "So is trying to change military culture. But if anyone can do it, it's someone who's been both a ghost and a sergeant, a warrior and a supporter." After the call, Foster walked out to the training ground where Anderson was teaching logistics personnel basic combat movements, while Connor showed infantry soldiers how to read supply manifests. The barriers were breaking down, slowly but surely. Her phone buzzed with a message from Titan. Teams fully recovered, ready for duty. Omega reconstituting under new leadership. Want your blessing. She typed back, "You have it. Stay safe. Stay ready. Ghosts never really die." As the sun set over Fort Bragg, Foster allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd spent 2 years hiding as a supply sergeant, been exposed in the most dramatic way possible, and survived a confrontation with ghosts from her past. But more importantly, she'd found a new purpose. "Colonel Foster?" She turned to find a young female recruit, nervous but determined. "Yes, Private?" "I'm Sarah Chen, ma'am. I've been assigned to supply, but everyone says it's not real military service, that I'm wasting my time if I want to make a difference." Foster smiled, remembering herself at that age, full of doubt, but desperate to prove herself. "Private Chen, let me tell you about the time a supply sergeant saved 381 Rangers with nothing but a memorized map and a hidden cache of ammunition." As she told the story, more soldiers gathered to listen. The legend of Ghost 7 was becoming something more, a bridge between worlds that had been separate for too long. If Foster's story hit you in the feels, wait until you see what happens next. 2 more incredible military stories are waiting on your screen. Click now and discover why they called her Ghost 7. Late that night, alone in her quarters, Foster received one final message. It was from Colonel Norbert at FOB Scorpion. "Your old supply depot has been turned into a memorial, not for Ghost 7, but for Sergeant Foster, who proved that heroes come in all forms. The inscription reads, 'In memory of those who serve in shadows, so others can stand in light.' Thought you should know." Foster smiled, closing the message. She'd started this journey as a disgraced operator, hiding as a supply sergeant. She'd been mocked, dismissed, overlooked. But in the end, she'd proven that true strength wasn't about rank or recognition. It was about being there when it mattered, doing what was necessary, regardless of who was watching or who would remember. Ghost 7 might be a legend, but Sergeant Foster had taught a more important lesson. Every soldier matters. Every role counts. And sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Tomorrow she'd continue building bridges between combat and support, teaching warriors to respect logistics and showing support personnel they were warriors too. But tonight, she allowed herself to remember all the identities she'd worn. Ghost 7, Sergeant Foster, Lieutenant Colonel Foster, and realized they were all true. She was all of them and none of them. She was simply a soldier who'd learned that service comes in many forms, and the greatest honor isn't in being recognized, but in ensuring others come home alive.